Yes, guys, and welcome back to episode 5 of Locked In. Let's get locked, man. Let's get locked. Today we've got James Ellis. Mr. James Ellis, founder of The Circle, founder of Tax Relief Corporation. We're excited to have him on board. Let's go!
Yeah, I mean, I think a good place to start, like you mentioned on Instagram, is potentially just going kind of back to basics, getting that initial, onto the property ladder, whether that be on the acquisition side, on the rental side. So maybe just kind of a little bit more information from your side on that specifically.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of like property, for me, it was always something that seemed unachievable.
Right. Yeah.
So I always felt like it was something that was really out of grasp. Like, property was something that people with a lot of money did, right? Which, of course, it is in a lot of ways. But I think with the help of like social media and like, look, even what you guys are doing at this stage, where you're talking about different angles and a way to get in with property. I think the sort of freedom of information moving around has made people aware that they've got options. And that there is actually a way onto the property ladder. For me personally, usual stuff, didn't have a lot of money, then got a little bit of money, and now I'm able to sort of maybe invest in certain things and look at where I want to go. And property, I think, again, always has been a very stable thing to invest in, like an investment, a way to invest your money, right? It's always gone up, even when there's been a dip. You look at the last, 50 years or whatever, even beyond that. It's been steady. So that's why, of course, so many people invest in property to make sure they've got good long-term investments. But for me, I think that I suppose for me, it's sort of working out what I wanted from it. Yeah. Because, I'm in a finance background, right? I own a tax relief company. Right. And there's something that accountants always do. They'll tell you what the most tax efficient way of taking your money is. And they'll say, right, this is the best way that you can take your money, but I need to ask you, what is it that you actually want? Right. So for me, it's more beneficial financially for me to invest my money in something long-term.
Sure.
But maybe I want that money in the next 10 years, not taking it out in 40 years.
Yeah. 100%.
So maybe I'm going to feel the pinch and it's not going to be as tax efficient, but maybe it's going to be better for having my money right now.
Depending on that.
Exactly, depending on what it is you want. So I think that that's something that a lot of people need to maybe start to put together. Like, what is it you actually want? Don't just take advice from people without understanding what it is you want, because a lot of people will hear a soundbite and think, right, that sounds good. Mm-hmm. But actually, is it what's going to get you to what you want? So I think you need to work out what it is you want and then reverse engineer it backwards. I think that there's a million things you can obviously do, as you guys will elaborate on, I'm sure, around property, to help you achieve your goals. And I think it's just important to ascertain what you want first.
100%. And we went into a bit more detail on our last podcast episode about kind of our first, start in property. And I'm sure it's similar to yourself in the way that it has very much transitioned, and the business we're running today is certainly not the business potentially that from day one we knew we'd be running. I'd like to jump into that in a bit more detail. When you first started in property, I'm guessing you transitioned from the tax relief company across to the property investment side. What was your initial goal, and potentially how's that changed over the last couple of months?
Well, it changes over time, doesn't it? Because you get educated when you do things, right? So I had in my mind for ages, I wanted to get a place that needed a bit of refurbishment, right? Needed a bit of work done to it, and then I'd let it out. But often the market dictates what you're going to do anyway, right? So I had in my mind, I'm going to refurbish this apartment and then rent it out. But by the time I'd done it, it was a crazy time, actually. It was about nearly 2 years ago now. And people, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Scottish property market, right? So I'm based in Scotland.
Yep.
Now, the way that it works here is everything's like an auction. You go offers over. So basically, I bought a flat that was valued, and you'll laugh because you're obviously down south, right? You're Essex. You're Essex. Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. So
prices,
exactly. So I bought. And again, I'm from London, so I understand the comparison. I've got the perspective of the two.
Yeah.
But I bought a flat for £100,000, a 2-bedroom flat, and it was a tenement building. It was a high ceilings, big bay windows, big open doorway and porch. It was class. It was lovely, and I bought it. And it was run down. There was like mold, and there was like some bits, and it was run down. So I got it for property value. It was valued at 100 grand, and I got it bang on 100 grand. Now, most people pay about 10 to 15% over, and if it was in slightly better condition, she would have got 110 grand for that. Yeah, no problem. But we got it because we had to put the work in. So I went in, ripped everything out. New bathroom, new kitchen, just, in a flat. So it wasn't too costly. Probably spent about 15 grand renovating it. Obviously safe in the knowledge that I knew that I've already made money the minute I've walked in, because I'm going to get 10 to 15% just for it being in a reasonable condition. And then I went to rent it out, and it was 9-minute drive from Glasgow Airport. Yeah. And it was a 12-minute drive from Glasgow Central train station. So it was an ideal location, opposite Bella Houston Park, perfect for rentals. It went on the market for sale because I'd seen a big house that I wanted, and I needed a chunky deposit for it. Right, yeah. And this is what I mean about it changing, because in my mind, I'm going to get a flat, I'm going to rent the flat out, I'm going to then get another flat, and I'm going to rent that out. But at that point, I'd made the decision about what I wanted. And it wasn't that I was going to have 10 buy-to-lets right now. I was going to actually look to invest the money I've got and then make significant payments in my mortgage to bring my monthly outgoings down. Sure. So that when I then do invest in these places, I'm set up in a home and I'm not bouncing from flat to flat, moving in different flats. That liability. Yeah. Okay. Why I do them up. So that's what I decided to do. And someone come in and offered me 140 grand for the flat straight away. And it took me I lived in it for 6 months, but it only took me 2 weeks to renovate it. Wow. So I renovated it in 2 weeks, lived there rent-free for, the next 5.5 months pretty much. And then I sold it for 140 grand, and I used that money to put a significant deposit down. And I say significant in comparison to this market, a significant deposit down in the home that I'm in now, which is a nice property, and my costs are low. My costs are low. So that's the game that I suppose I'm playing, is I want to try and get my ingoings up and my outgoings down. And that was, hopefully put me on the right path to now make other investments now that I'm sort of secure in this house.
100%. I mean, I'd probably
give the background that you wanted.
100%. Yeah.
Cool.
I think it's important, right? Because like you say, as you get educated, the only way to get educated is by being in the space. I mean, we did the same thing. I'll keep it very high level, but there was a property in Colchester. We got offer accepted. We had a fairly small pot of cash that we'd built from other businesses, and the goal was to do that. 6 months later, maybe do another one. Say things changed. We had catch-22 on ours, so that caused everything to flip like that. And we just did a lot of YouTube stuff. Freedom of information now is incredible. The amount of added value that people are giving. I mean, like ourselves, right? I'd like to think we give quite a lot of value, and it works in a win-win way. For us, it shows kind of our expertise, what we can do. But for investors or people coming into the space, it's free information. You don't need to go and spend 12 grand on a course. Or
100%. Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask you guys about, because off the back of what I'd learned anyway, and seeing how nuanced it is, it's not as simple as just a buy to let. Maybe there's, and the thing that I keep, which intrigues me, is the rent to rent stuff that you guys have posted about. Yeah. But which I'll ask about. But for me, I was, I changed my mind a few times. And what I like about property in general, as opposed to other investments, is you actually can change your mind because it's a secure investment. When you put your money into it, you can take it back out, you can move it around, you can split it and put it into other areas. So off the back of that, I invested, funny you say about a property course, just a local person to Glasgow, again, because he knows the market here. We went with him. We did a couple of months course, learned quite a lot. We went on to some commercial lets. He had done some office stuff as well, which is pretty cool. And now I sort of have invested in different people's portfolios. So I'm giving them a bit of money to see a return back. So I've done that with a few people rather than running my own projects. Sure. A couple of reasons. Been quite busy with my own business, which is paramount because that's what's allowed me this situation
to invest. Yeah, of course.
Exactly, to invest. So I need to look after that. But also, what I've been educated on is actually it's a really good way of investing your money in other people and people that are maybe able to go 100% with property, whereas I'm only maybe able to go 15 or 20% of my effort. So I was going to ask you guys, where does rent to rent, and I've seen the posts, but where does it like fit, and how lucrative really is it, and how many landlords are open to this idea?
Sure. I mean, do you want to kick off with the first couple, and then
Yeah, I mean, just touching on what you last said about kind of the working backwards. I think that was exactly, just touching on or following on from what you said, Noah, as in because of that situation, it led us to then put that at the kind of tail end of what we wanted to do. So that was something we wanted to kind of grow into, the BRR model and the flips. But then, as you mentioned, our strategy changed to bring in the cash flow.
You got to bear in mind as well, when we were purchasing that property, we didn't know what rent to rent was. You know, it wasn't like it was something considered and no, we'll go with the purchase route. It was more,
this is the only thing that we think we can do.
Traditional route. And for us, I mean, you were lucky because I was working full-time recruit. So my background's recruitment. And what you'll see between sourcing and recruitment is everything's transferable.
Very similar.
In recruitment, you've got a contractor, you've got an employer. In sourcing, you've got an investor, you've got a landlord. So the kind of outreach strategies that we were able to implement from day one probably put us ahead of the curve. Allowed us to get in front of more landlords and investors. We learned a lot from conversation. Until you get on the phone and speak to an investor, you don't know what they want, how they're going to ask it, or what kinds of questions. 18 months down the line, we're in a position now that we can predict a lot of the questions that come from a typical rent to rent process,
which is what you want to, which is the perfect way to be when you're selling something anyway.
Exactly.
Trying to convince someone to your way of thinking. If you know what they're going to ask, then you can prepare the best response. And I think those businesses, whether you're in property or any business, they're the type of situations where you get into a bit of a flow state.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. We translated a lot of our processes across, and now we can almost tick an investor through a CRM. It's great for an investor because they know exactly what to expect, when to expect it. But the goal for us then was, look, we've done 150, 160 deals in 18 months, or postcodes. Some of those are like big blocks as well as individual units. But that has allowed us to learn a lot of the objection handling, and going back to that transferability. I'm sure there's probably, a lot of transferable skills, even though it's a completely different section, right? Rent to acquisitions and tax relief company to kind of what we were doing previously in recruitment. I'm sure you've seen so many transferable.
It's all a sale. It's all a sale. Everything's a sale. You're always trying to convince someone to your way of thinking, right? You're trying to convince a landlord that they should rent a property to you and you're going to guarantee everything. You need to convince them that you're experts in what you're doing. And that's really all anyone wants to know. I think at the heart of it really is this person an expert? Are they wasting my time? Are they full of shit? Are they chancers? Are they chancers or are they actually experts? And I guess you two are probably going to feel like you've got a bit of a chip on your shoulder, being younger people in this space. You've got a bit of a point to prove that you are experts. And just because you're a couple of good looking young lads with a bit of cash, it don't mean that you don't know what you're talking about. Actually, we are all of these good things that you can see, but we're also a lot more than that as well.
And so I think that's what the socials really allowed us to push.
That's what we wanted to push. I think
as well, before the socials, you meet an agent at a property and the first thing they see is your age. Regardless of whether you've sold 1 deal or 100 deals, it doesn't really matter. The socials and our face being kind of in front of everything, the goal is over the next 5 years just to build that reputation. People start seeing as much of us.
As long as you're honest, man. As long as you're honest, that's all that matters. So the thing is, when everyone's going left, if you go right, everyone sounds the same. That's what it is. Whether you're in tax, whether you're in property, everyone sounds the same. And to me, and again, it's the same with tax, right? I work in tax, which is corporate, right? Very corporate, very formal. But the clients we deal with are all different. We've got agricultural clients, pharmaceutical clients, engineers, construction workers, but everything. So you can't have this corporate approach when you're discussing things with potential clients or even existing clients when everyone's different. A builder is going to sound different, and he isn't going to like me saying, okay, so essentially what this means is
you got that.
All that essentially stuff, let's get rid of that, and I'll just tell him what's happening.
Black and white.
Hearing it straight. And that's really been the key to the success of my business outside of property and the other investments that I'm sort of pursuing. That's the key, is the straight, to the point, no nonsense approach. And for me, what I can really like about your posts is it's obvious that you're going straight to it. That post in particular, I think it might have been Noah, where you're going, come here.
The pushbacks and
come here. Next one, all of that. Like, to me, I ain't really seen much of that. You know, you see a lot of the reels where people are talking over the back of them just showing you around somewhere. But I really like the whole train. It's basically like you're training people. You're training people.
We're trying to. I mean, you know, we've seen course providers. You know, we for us, it's important that we haven't done training before, because we're not copying and pasting someone else's training program.
I think that's like our main USP. I think that's what we're kind of pushing forward. The fact that we learn it from kind of the progression that we did and mistakes, as you've mentioned. So it's just providing that value to anyone else that wants to, or, you know, enjoys the space. So
100%. And you'll take bits from each thing that you learn, and each person, if you did take something from somebody else's course, who cares? You learned it, you paid for it. And if you want to teach someone else it, that's
100%.
Up to you.
No, 100%.
You know what I mean?
100%. And I think, I mean, getting back onto that final question on the rent-to-rent side as well, how lucrative can it be? Obviously, you know, to introduce to the audience, I know James has not previously invested in rent-to-rent. So, you know, kind of compared to some of the other guests we've had, you know, it's a bit of a different situation. So it'd be great to kind of give you an overall understanding on that. You know, rent compared to acquisition is so different in terms of the way it diversifies your portfolio. You know, like you say, these chunk deposits potentially for acquisitions, you know, you're talking on a rent-to-rent side to get into an opportunity and have it running, you know, 5, 6, 7,000 pounds. You know, that's across your deposit, which is refundable, your sourcing fee, which we charge, your rent, which is obviously earned back in your bookings. And then if it's furnishings are required, then sometimes furnishings are necessary. But in terms of, you know, relevant cash flow, we've seen a lot of investors that already are developers, already are, you know, maybe looking at longer term approaches that will then implement a diversified portfolio of rent-to-rents, because that will give them 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 pounds a month in consistent cash flow, which can then pay for deposits. You know, it pays for planning permissions, things that then are, you know, because like you say, there's some investors that will build a rent-to-rent portfolio. They have 100, 200, 300 properties in the portfolio and they don't need to acquire assets. You know, a lot of investors' goal is at some point, similar to ourselves, is to start acquiring assets. The cash flow that rent-to-rents gives you will, you know, provide you invaluable profits, basically. And the amount of investors, you know, across those 150 units, I'd say we've probably worked with 60, 65 investors. So you see investors coming back. You know, a lot of investors are on retained portfolio builds now. So we're not looking at one property, we're looking at 3 to 5 at a time.
I just touch on that as well. You know, for yourself, I work with a lot of international investors as well. So I've currently just done a deal, RG1 deal, for an international investor who is looking, like for yourself, more of a kind of passive approach, but building the cash flow per month. So for him, he would be having it fully managed by a management company in the area who have cleaning and linen teams on boots on the ground. They focus on longer term corporate bookings. So maybe a group of 5 or 6 workers coming into a 2 to 3 bedroom property, staying in that property for maybe 3 to 4 months. And across that period of time, you've got kind of a stable, you know, a stable revenue coming in with lower outgoings, such as booking fees, cleaning fees, etc. So, you know, we work with, as Noah said, we work with both, you know, active investors who are maybe in an area that are looking to grow and, you know, be the front and center of that brand. But we also work with, you know, a number of other investors that do just want to kind of have that passive return. So
there's a lot of management. For sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, exactly. Well, this is what I was going to ask. There's 2 things I was going to ask off the back of that, right? And these are questions, I suppose, that, again, like, people are going to have, like, if they've made money, right, and they've got money to invest in property, they're probably to somewhat smart, business savvy, let's say, if they, you know, acquired some wealth that they're going to now invest in other areas, right? So I'm guessing that a couple of questions that they might have, or questions that I would have if it was to be me and just put myself in like an investor's shoes, right, is, in terms of the Airbnb, well, I say Airbnb, I'm jumping to the conclusion, but let's say we do rent to rent, right? And then we're thinking we're going to Airbnb it, put it on booking.com. Where's the line? Where do you draw the line between how much you spend on, like you said, some refurbishments may be required to bring it up to standard? But obviously, you guys both know when you're using Airbnb, you're looking at something a little bit cool, a little bit, you know, something that looks a bit plush.
Yeah.
But do you see what I mean? Versus what you're going to be renting on a 6-month tenancy agreement or whatever. So where do you draw the line between what you spend to get, the eyes on the property, to get the right amount of bookings, but versus your outgoings? Like, where do you draw the line? Is there a figure that you put on it, a percentage, or do you just judge it by how you feel?
We work with formulas quite a lot, to be fair. When we analyze any deal, we'll do analysis based on nightly rates for comparables of a property. Let's say we've got a property that needs refurbishment, right? We know that's going to require maybe £5,000-6,000 worth of work across redecoration, across furnishing, etc. That may mean your upfront costs are now £10,000-11,000, right, for that deal. We work out our analysis as we always are key that a deal breaks even before the 9-month mark. So if a deal's breaking even based on your upfront costs and our forecasted analysis at 70%, then that for us is a stackable and a good deal. The way we then come to that end figure, and we'll put the website below so you guys can see some active deal examples. But all of our monthly profit forecasts are based on nightly rates from other comparables on Airbnb, on Booking.com, Vrbo, Agoda, etc. Typically 4 to 5 comparables, similar size, similar location. We'll take an average of the weekday and the weekend rates. We'll then work out a blended average, lowball the blended average by another 5%. And that lowball 5% is what we'll use at 70%. So times 21 nights in a month to give you your estimated forecast. That we have guys that will take a property on, they want it fully passive managed. So we pass it to a management company who then gets them a 6-7 month booking, right? And, you might get £20 less a night, but you get 30 nights out of the month rather than 21.
I think that's why we show some variation on the website as well. Just as I've mentioned, some management companies will focus on that larger corporate bookings or the area that property's in would lend itself more to that. Whereas you may have others that are, banging the jewelry quarter in Birmingham, for example, and a 1 or 2 bed, and they'll just, fly out constantly on shorter term accommodation. So it's a little bit of what the landlord would prefer. You may have a property like, for example, the RG1 that I'm working on, she would rather kind of more stable guests in there, so for longer periods of time. And in that sense, we would then kind of adapt the numbers and show kind of variation. But we always urge investors to do their own due diligence, of course, but we kind of break it down as entirely as we can to show this is what we would expect. This is what, also speak with the management company, speak with this, discuss this, and then get.
And it's
a
win-win, right? If you find a property that for the landlord offers a guaranteed rent, they're happy. They've got annual upward rent reviews in all our contracts. So
property being looked after, cleaning, coming in after every guest, leaves, etc. So for landlords, it definitely has worked. I think that's why we're opening up I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's where the next step, so kind of pushing on our growth, and kind of be great to hear where your next maybe 2-3 years are looking. From our side, we want a lettings agent open by the start of next year. If you see kind of where we sit now as sources, as a sourcing company, we're having to work with agents that maybe aren't quite, reliable. You're not getting viewing booked in, etc. And that causes reputational issues with your investors. Alternatively, we go the landlord route, but when you're pitching to a landlord as a sourcing company, there's just that slight confusion, right? There's that slight, what do you do? How do you get paid, etc. Which is why we're sort of setting up long-term lettings. Long-term lettings will be our estate agency, only focusing on lettings of 3 years plus in Essex and London. The goal will be to franchise that out over the next couple of years across the UK. So we have, guys running long-term lettings agencies, and every single property that's then funneled through firstly is now signed up for a 28-day sole agency agreement, so we have full commitment on that property, but it also then is funneled directly to the sourcing company, who has 1,000 investors kind of ready to go on the database side.
So I think that would be massive. I think that'd be massive for you guys when you get when you've got a brand, which obviously you're building anyway, a personal brand, a property sourcing brand, but when you build like you're saying, you've got a physical presence and a physical company, real estate company. Then when you're calling, saying I'm calling from here, it's a lot more like it feels a lot more professional, I guess. And not that it wouldn't be now, but you understand what I mean. From a landlord who's going to be judging you from the minute you pick up the phone, it makes, I'm sure it'll make all the difference.
And just internalize it.
If you can do it now, you'll have no issues doing it when you've got a company brand behind you.
Exactly. And if we can we look at kind of our process, because we offer the whole thing to investors, right? But obviously we internally right now don't offer each of those individual services. So for example, the management side, we've got companies that we work with, they're passive management, they can be implemented into any deal in that circle of events. The one area where we still see issues is the third parties, right? You know, if you can rely on as few third parties as possible, you're going to have the most successful business. So,
well, this is what you was talking about, passive. See, when you mentioned about passive income, see, this is the thing, right? I don't know. I think it's a bit of a myth. I don't think it exists, right? And maybe that's a bit out there. Because I know you guys will probably be talking about passive income. But for me, like you mentioned about management companies and things, it's very difficult, you know, to give over control and then it still be passive. Because there's always going to be a property management company that isn't serving your tenant as best as they could,
or as best as you think they could. Or as best as
they think you could, and then you're going to go, right, okay, I need to go and find a new property management company. So even when you go into those situations, so again, maybe you guys are going to be the difference, and let's hope so, right, that you know, that you'll be able to offer something where you say, now we're our own company and we don't rely on third parties, we'll truly help your income become passive. And I think that's a great selling point, because you just hear the term passive income. I've got a networking community called The Circle.
Yeah, I wanted to come on to that as well.
Yeah, I've got all different, you know, business owners in there. We've got property developers, we've got people that do similar things to yourselves, but we've also got recruiters and salespeople and IT and everything, right? In this networking group. The idea of the group was to set up and basically support people from an early stage in a business to sharing with some of the more experienced people, sharing how to navigate some serious stuff like some big legal issues or whatever, like, you know, significant problems. So and that was the purpose of the group. But one thing that I hear from people in the group, which it always gets brought up every so often, is like, hey, does anyone know how I can make some passive income with low effort? And I just laugh. I just go, low effort and passive income. I'm messaging back. I'm like, listen, if you guys find out how I can do that, let me know. Let me know. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't. So the question I have, I suppose, is like, again, on a scale of like something being not passive at all and being completely passive, where do you guys see, like, and I'll talk about my growth and that, and I know it's like me asking you the questions here, but I just want to know, like, I'm just curious. Like where do you see property in general, be it how passive is it, and what areas are the most passive in property for someone to get in who wants passive income?
That's a great question. I think, you know, a conversation we had this morning is probably a great place to start. So look, we, you know, obviously our brokerage initially was just rent to rent, right? As the network's grown, the ecosystem's grown, you know, we have people kind of requesting different, you know, investors types, different strategies, whatever that may be. So of course, you know, we also then look to grow alongside that. So now we've got some funding options available alongside the rent to rent. So I would say that serviced accommodation, you know, if you get the right management company in, they'll take care of all of the guest communications, the reviews, you know, the booking cleans in, booking linen hire, etc. So you wouldn't see any of that. But what you do have with a serviced accommodation portfolio is you have access to the back end systems. So that, you know, in terms of passivity, I'd say, you know, you're looking at like 75-80% realistically, right? Because, you know, there'll still be tweaks that maybe you want to make. There may be months that you get a booking in for 6 months and you sit back and, you know, relax. We had I think it was like a £32,000 booking at a 5-bed in Coventry because we initially started managing when we sold deals, you know, kind of thinking again, internalize everything. But we got to 52 properties and you know, it was manic, like ridiculous. And we can service our investors as well as we were doing on the sourcing, on the management. So, you know, we partnered with only a small few. There's a link on our site to like 4 or 5 companies that we work with closely that truly offer a fairly passive income. Would I say that's completely passive compared to the funding side? Probably not. But the funding side, something that with our strongest investors, we've got a couple of guys that are looking for, you know, 15, 20, 25,000 for deals themselves. But instead of offering them based on JV shares or profit shares, they're being offered directly on personally guaranteed fixed returns. So as we see investors that just want those fixed, completely passive returns, you know, it's
lower back,
lower percentage, but you know, the risk and reward ratio, right? You know, you might earn 50% ROI in year one on an SA, but you might also lose 25%. You know, so I think that you've got to look at serviced accommodation over a 3-year period. You know, all contracts are signed to 3 to 5 years. And that first year is really about setting your tone. You know, you're going to get clients that are then going to be retained clients for the remainder and the duration of that tenancy.
Makes sense.
But there's
it's the same as anything though, isn't it? Like the more you put in, the more you get out. So if you
if you put, let's say, if you put rent to rent, if you're going rent to rent and you're putting a little bit in, then I'm guessing it's going to take a little bit more work. You're going to have to like fix the place up a bit for booking.com or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the entrance level is
lower.
Cheaper.
The barriers to entry are far lower.
Yeah.
You know, you'll see on your side as well, right? What we'll do when we buy properties is we'll run them as service accommodation still, because now we know that model. It makes no sense for us to look at a buy-to-let market if we know we can achieve potentially 2-3x the rent, you know, as running the service accommodation ourselves.
And at that point, without the risk of
the rent because you already got the mortgage risk. So I think that's somewhere we'll look. You know, we've got one rent to rent in Brighton that does well, but you know, it's funny you mentioned about the refurbishment.
Exactly what I was going to say.
We put too much money into that one. That was right at the start of our journey. You know, we spent like $7,000 painting the whole house, for example. You know, and then furnishings on top. So we're you know, it's doing well, it's making money, but in terms of
you've overdone it a bit with the development,
and it doesn't make sense for and it doesn't make sense for a rent to rent, because at the end of the day you don't own the property. You know, basically, we basically did the refurb for the landlord at that point in time. So again, there's something we learned from and something that we'll take on board. But I'd also say, rent to rent, you never want to be spending too much upfront on furnishings or
unless you put, say, a PLO option in place. You know, we've had a couple.
Do you know what I might do? You've inspired me. I might buy a few properties, and then what I'll do is I'll seek people that are first time rent to rent.
And
just let them do all of my properties for free.
There you go.
There you go.
We take that bit out, so no one sees.
That's it. Thanks a lot, guys. That's all I need. See you later.
But no, I know we've got about 5 minutes left. So
cool.
Leading on to the circle, obviously that ecosystem, you know, network's your net worth, right? You know, for us, it's been so far about building a CRM system rather than having that as an open network. But it is something we'd look to do. So I'd love to kind of understand a bit more about how the circle came together and where it's leading.
Yeah, well, it comes together, just reverting back to what I was saying before about the sort of non-bullshit approach to things. I joined, I'll just name them, I don't really mind, BNI, Business Networking International. I joined that networking sort of community, if you like. Costs about $1,000 to join for a year. Seems reasonable when you think I'll get back a certain amount of business from it.
Sure.
But they're sort of they're flogging you a dead horse, right? You go every Wednesday morning for like a breakfast meeting, you get a 60-second pitch, and then each week you get like a 5-minute or 10-minute slot for a new speaker from the group to stand up and communicate what they do. Right now, I've done so many of these networking things where you just like can smell the desperation off of these people in this group, right? They're basically, there's a Herbalife geezer, there's, you know, a life coach. Again, I'm not against them, but it's like a life coach that's like out of shape and ain't had a job in 30 years. Then there's like a woman selling candles. There's like, you know what I mean? There's these. Then there's an electrician and a plumber that seem to do quite a lot of business. Yeah. Because they're just helping each other with a business.
They collaborate with each other. Yeah.
With Sam, right? So, and there's this thing where you have to give referrals every week. And so people are just coming up with like nonsense referrals to give. And it's just a big waste of time, really, from what I can see. And for anyone that really wants to do well in business, right? The people that seem to be on the downward, slope, if you like, of their career. Mm-hmm. Now, there were some good aspects of this community, you know, that I had noticed. There were some good aspects of this community, some good parts, but a lot of nonsense and a lot of time wasting. So I thought, let me take the fact that we can set up a community, a networking group. Let's make sure it's a no-nonsense group. There's no fake referrals going in. There's no, you don't have to bring 3 referrals a week. Yeah. Let's just have it as like an open forum where we meet up weekly on a Zoom call. So it's not like you have to make too much effort.
Yeah.
And we can share best practice, and it won't cost you an arm and a leg to join. And I can provide loads of value for the fee that it does cost to join up. It's 90 quid for 6 months or 150 quid for a year. So it's really...
Barriers to entry are low as well, yeah.
I can give you that value in about 2 minutes on a discussion about anything to do with taxes or finance or sales or business in general. So for me, it was a no-brainer for people to join. So we've got 40 odd members now. We only actually launched it in August. We've got 40 members already, and we don't just let anyone in. It's people that run a business or they've got high hopes as like an entrepreneur, and they're looking at ways into business or barriers to entry, like you say, is into different industries and looking how to overcome those barriers. So there's a lot of good conversations happening in terms of the business. Like, I suppose what I'm trying to do alongside that is I'm growing my business at the same time. So we deal with once a year tax saving initiatives, right?
Yeah.
For businesses in the industries that I mentioned before. But we're now looking at monthly support for companies. So we offer different business advisory services. So we now offer corporate sort of finance, like general accountancy, VAT returns, your annual accounts, and we look at ways to make you as tax efficient as possible. We're also helping some companies with like legal advice. So that's something that's going on in the future, but we're looking to hire a solicitor full time so that we can then offer like a credit control function and a legal arm to our business as well. And basically we want to be a one-stop shop for like all business needs.
Yeah.
If I can grow that and grow the networking community at the same time, that's great. That's going to allow me more revenue to then obviously invest in property. And this is where I'm sort of intrigued by, because this is where I basically slam the brakes on.
Right.
I had in my mind about refurbishing and renting, but actually it's so nuanced. When I did that course, it didn't, even though the people in the course are of course trying to encourage me to just do it, just do it. And I sort of explained that I'm not putting the brakes on because I'm apprehensive, because I don't want to, but actually what I want to do is make sure that what I'm doing works for me.
Yeah.
It's all good saying, let's build a portfolio. Great. Let's do that. But actually, let me look at where I want to invest. Let me look at if I want to do rent to rent, which is I'm intrigued by, or if I just want to be a flat out investor and see a lower return over a period of time. Let me weigh up these options. So whilst I build up the revenue to make these investments when the time comes. So that has always been my goal, and it remains my goal. And thanks to like your content and what you share, as well as some other people in different spaces, you give us a lot to think about. And
that's the goal. No, with James, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Look, we will hopefully be able to get you back on at some point further down the line, and we can kind of touch base across the board.
Yeah, part two.
Yeah.
when you've taken over as a real estate G.
You may have a portfolio of 10 rent to rents by then as well.
Exactly. I will have. I'm getting on it right away as soon as you get off.
No, honestly, thank you so much, James. If you want
to
shout out any of your socials below, we'll put them in there. Guys, please, obviously, feel free to
Mr. James Ellis _ on Instagram. That'll do. Follow me on there.
Love it. And any circle requests, look, get them across, and we can build that.
We'll look at your application and we'll
please.
Fingers crossed on our side then.
Nice one, guys.
Pleasure, James.
Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Have a good one.